Great. So welcome everyone to a series of webinars. The first one is called What is the New Normal? And then we've got another one on the 29th of July. How are top-end South Africans feeling? And then we've got a third one on the 21st of July, which is media-based. The 26th of August. Media Matters, Shift in Media Consumption. So welcome to the Y5 team. We've had unprecedented interest in this webinar, as I said, Brandon Stew. So welcome to you, and thanks again. Director of Storytelling, Brandon de Kock, is going to take us through what the new normal is. Stuart and Julie-Ann Bell are his colleagues from the Y5 team, so welcome to both of you as well. Elka, our product marketing manager, is going to showcase some of our software that we have BrandMapp 2021 loaded into after Brandon has showcased the data. So thanks, Elk. And over to you, Brandon.
Cool. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for asking us to be back with you. And hello to everybody out there listening. Thanks for joining. So yeah, today is an interesting start. I feel like I'm somewhere between a gender reveal party and sort of taking my newborn baby out for the first time. This really is the first public viewing of the data or of some of our key findings. So bear with me if I'm overly exuberant about my bleating little child, but hopefully it's going to be quite good fun. If nothing else, as always, my promise is to make you even more interesting next time you're allowed to have people around for dinner. So, okay, let me jump straight in. For those of you who don't know Y5 and BrandMapp, we're a consumer insights consultancy. So we happen to have this unbelievable data resource. It's a survey that we do every year called BrandMapp. And on top of that, we offer consumer insights consultancy services. What we do every year is we send out a couple of million invitations to take part in an online research survey. This year, 33,389 respondents. It's our biggest response by a country mile. I think that speaks a lot to the fact that more people are more digitally engaged now than ever before. But it's a remarkable sort of result, and definitely makes makes this particular survey the largest independent survey of its kind. I'll explain exactly who we survey in a moment. And from a methodology point of view, those of you who are sort of interested in sample frameworks and stuff like that, I really don't want to dig into that right now. If you'd like to know more about it, we're happy to send you sort of the bump, which you can read in your own time. I think it's more interesting for us to get into what's actually sort of sits inside the data. We launched this product about 8 years ago our tag at the time was sort of amps for rich people. We'd like to think we've become a little bit more sophisticated than that over 8 years, but effectively it's an attempt at a landscape survey of a certain segment of South African society. So we track all these different things, all sorts of behavioral stuff, obviously your full demographics, and then your media habits. What we're kind of intending to do with BrandMapp is to take people on this sort of journey. So, the idea of who are your customers, how do they live, how do they behave, and then importantly, how can you reach them, right? I'll explain where this sits, because we're not talking about the whole of South Africa by any manner of means. So what we really do as a company is, one of the ways I try to explain it to people is that we're in the business of cause and effect. We're trying to find out what causes consumer behavior and what the effects are. And that's really what all data does, right? It either shows you the effect of something, or it gives you a starting point where you can see what the cause is going to be and what the effect's going to be. And what's super interesting about cause and effect in the last year is that we've also had to throw in this idea of comorbidities, because we never really thought that comorbidities would exist as much in business as they do in human beings, right? So we're coming out of this year where people with pre-existing conditions have obviously been a lot more susceptible to getting badly ill. And we think that the same thing applies in a business sense. So why is this all important with COVID? Well, I think a lot of the time, especially in the idea of consumer insights or the department of consumer insights, we tend to get cause and effect the wrong way around. And the analogy I'll use is, there was this beautiful moment right at the beginning of lockdown. I don't know if you guys did the same thing, but I suddenly discovered that I can contact my friends all over the world and have like Zoom drinks. And I was having a Zoom drink with a friend of mine in California who sent me this picture. And she said, "Oh, look at you. You've done what everybody else has done. You've gone and grown a beard." And I went, that's weird. She said, "Yeah, you're just hiding away from the world like everybody else." And I was like, "No, I didn't really grow the beard. The beard grows. Actually, I hide by shaving it off my face every morning. I hide who I really am, right?" Stephen Colbert famously said it, American TV host, and I was curious what I actually looked like, and it turns out it's this. So I think that last year really gave us in this world of consumer insights a wonderful opportunity to just stop and reconsider whether we were looking at everything the right way around. And that's hopefully what this piece of research that we've done is going to allow people to do, to go, did we have it the right way around? Were we asking the right questions? So the first thing that everybody thinks is that lockdown and COVID caused a whole lot of problems in the world, and that's true. But remember, the world actually had a comorbidity issue to start with. So it's not like everything was fabulous before the world started coughing. This picture, which became a global kind of meme, it's showing over 200 people in a traffic jam at the top of the world, waiting for their ultimate Instagram moment on top of Mount Everest. That was in April 2019, a long time before anybody had heard of COVID. So the world was not in a great place to start with. There were problems at the top of the world. Imagine what it was like at sea level. In South Africa, we had our own mountain to climb. Some of you who've seen our work before will know this picture very well. This is the income triangle of South Africa. It's basically a visual representation of the famous Gini coefficient. So if you look at the total South African adult population, about 40 million adults, about 70% of those adults currently live in households earning under 10,000 Rand a month. Inside of there are 13 to 17 million social grants and a lot of really, really struggling, desperate people. Then we look a little bit higher up the income triangle, the adults living in households earning between 10 and 40,000 a month. We call that the middle class. That's our definition of middle class. And right at the top of the pyramid, you've got this tiny group of 2.5 million people, adults, who live in households earning 40,000 Rand a month or more. So the reason it's important is that when you split the 2.7 trillion Rand of income, the bottom of that triangle earn about 400 billion Rand. The middle class earn about 900 billion. And that top 5% of the triangle, that tiny group of just 2.5 million adults, is taking home more than half of all income, of all personal income in the country, which is quite a radical kind of situation. And when it comes to research, the reality is that a lot of research, especially proportionate representative sampling kind of framework research, does an incredibly good job of describing that 70% at the bottom of the triangle. What we set out to do a decade ago, and have been specializing in for the last 8 years, is trying to work out what's happening in the top of that triangle. For a start, it's 100% of the taxes, it's 80% of consumer income, and therefore 80% of spend. And it's quite poorly misunderstood. Apart from anything, if something goes wrong at the top of that triangle, can you imagine the roll down effect on the people at the bottom? Because somebody has to get keep the machinery of the economy working in order to create jobs. And those people, the economically empowered 12 million people in this country, pretty much sit in the top of that triangle. So that's what BrandMapp does. We call it the BrandMapp universe. We have a very deep understanding of this top of the triangle. And that's the results that I'm going to be showing you today. Specifically, we talk about the 12 million middle class and up adults, middle class being 10,000 and up, who live in households earning that income and have access to the internet. So first question, obviously, is what on earth did 2020 do to the total income of South Africa? That picture that I just showed you, how much did it change? And it's a hard question to answer because the only place we really have to go looking is either the South African Revenue Services, who I don't really trust. I mean, I don't trust their data necessarily because it's not that I don't trust SARS. They release data in a strange way and at strange times. The place to go looking for an answer is actually the annual Treasury report. And in February the 28th this year, the Treasury finally released their budget review. This is not my information. You'll see at the bottom there, it says Source National Treasury. If you're interested in this, go to the National Treasury website. You can download the budget review for 2021. If you like Stephen King novels, you'll love the budget review for 2021. It's an absolute horror show. Just warning you that if everything possible ever goes right, in terms of Treasury budgeting and stuff, we're only going to be about another 280 billion rand in debt in 4 years' time. That's if everything goes right. Okay, so there are some issues that we have to face. One of them is this idea of, has the middle class completely been pulverized by 2020? And there have been a few leaked reports. There was a NIDS university report that got leaked out, which was never supposed to be formalized, that said that we'd halved the middle class and that we were headed for a complete tax disaster. And well, that's not really true. This is Treasury's, this is what the table that comes directly out of this year's Treasury report. So don't fry your brain too much looking at the numbers. What's important is that down the left-hand side, you've got income bands, and then you've got registered individuals, and you've got actual taxpayers. And that's the number that I look at every year, is to go, how many people are actually paying tax relative to the registered tax base? So there are 14.1 million people who technically have a formal job in this country, and only 6.96 million of them actually pay any tax. If you go all the way up to the top there, you'll see that the lower bands, so 80 to 150,000 Rand a year, is the single largest group of adults who pay any sort of tax. If you go all the way to the right, you'll see that they only pay 2.8% of all taxes. Okay, so it's a fun kind of picture, this. It's more than fun. It's super important because it allows us to try and understand what's actually happened in terms of income. So what I did was I'll try to make it easy for you. Again, this is brilliant. This is really going to get your brains kind of working early in the morning. Try to follow this. So what I've done is I've charted that Treasury data for the last 8 years. I always do this just to see where things are going. The first view here is I've taken people earning 30,000 Rand a month or more. And when you chart them up here, you see that that group of people in 8 years has grown from 900,000 to about 2 million. So we've doubled the top end in this country in the last 8 years. But if you look and see what's happened between 2020 and 2019, in other words, what was the effect of lockdown, you see that about 10,000 people dropped out of that tax bracket. So that's 10,000 out of 2 million. It means that in the top earning bracket, less than 0.5% of people dropped out of that tax bracket. So effectively, Teflon coated. When it came to the effects of lockdown. If I take that group and I add to them the people who earn basically 10,000 Rand a month or more, that's what the chart looks like. So not nearly the same kind of growth over the last 8 years. And in the last year, what happened was that group went from 5.25 million down to 5.1. So that means we've lost about 153,000 people out of, that's the middle class earners, right? Again, though, it's 153,000 out of 5.2 million. So actually, when you look at the people who pay 98% of all personal taxes, it's only 3% of them who've dropped out of their tax bracket. That's not where the pain's been. The pain is if we look at that total number of taxpayers. And there what we see is that in the calendar year, we've actually lost 682,000 people out of the tax bracket. For the government, that means close to 90 billion Rand less in tax. Quite hectic. But look where it's come from, so what it's mean, if you do the maths, which I've done for you, very, very mathematically inclined, that's not that hard, I promise. You look at the 7,000 to 10,000 Rand a month bracket. So that's the newcomers to the middle class. And we now see that 23% of them have dropped out of that tax bracket. So that's where the real pain has been in the economy. What is going to happen over the next year, we're not terribly sure about. If I were you guys, I would desperately watch the debt situation in this country. Go to keep an eye on TransUnion and what they're saying about the percentage of people in debt as the year goes on. But right now, what we can say for sure is that the middle class and up, the taxpayers of South Africa, the people who pay over 90% of the taxes, were a hell of a lot more resistant to and resilient during lockdown than I think everybody thought they were going to be, which is an incredibly good story for a lot of us. It's very sad that there is people who were in a bad place who are now in a really, really traumatized place. But in terms of trying to keep the economy going in some way at the top, that top 30%, I think it's been like super resilient. So all of this leads us to ask questions and the last point is that the quarterly labor force survey, just to back that number up, the quarterly labor force survey for 2021 first quarter says that in total, we lost about 3 million jobs during lockdown, but we've got about 2.4 million of them back. So the net loss in in first quarter was close to 600,000 formal sector jobs lost. Okay, big question then. Are we there yet, Dad? You know, like we had this year, it all went crazy. What are the kind of the indicators that we are something close to back to a new normal, or, you know, when will things get back to whatever they're going to get back to? Have we just arrived anywhere? And there's no doubt that, you know, there were some very unexpected things that happened during lockdown. For me, the day the shock set in, July the 29th, 2020, a day that will live in infamy forever. I went into my local Woolworths, shock horror. There was no Marmite. I didn't know that the Marmite industry had a massive comorbidity and that it relies 100% on the beer industry, because Marmite is a byproduct of beer. I was shocked and horrified. The idea of living on boerewors flavored Bovril for the rest of my life was just not going to happen. I phoned my friends, Marmageddon, this is it, the moment is here. Of course, that didn't really last very long. Marmite was back on the shelves in a month or two, and I know it's now not, you know, we're having another Marmageddon moment, but I think it's for slightly different reasons. The point here is that life seemed to return back to normal pretty quickly. You know, the difference between Bovril and Marmite was literally 3 weeks. So what other indicators are there that things are getting back to some kind of new normal faster than we thought? Well, here's a fun one for you. TomTom. So, you know, like Garmin, the Garmin GPS is in your car. TomTom have a thing where they publish the congestion ratings for the world. And they do it by city. So I went and had a look at Cape Town. I happen to live down in Cape Town, and our traffic here, you may, those of you who don't live here may not know it, but we're probably the most unlivable city in the world. The traffic in Cape Town is just absolutely horrific. Everything comes to a gridlock. And it has been doing so for the last 3 years. Along came 2020. We went from having a congestion rating of 32%, whacking down to 23. TomTom declared that the world would never be the same, that traffic would never return to the levels that it was at the beginning. Everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same. Well, I went and downloaded their charts for last week, and that's what Cape Town looked like last week. And if you see that little red chart at the bottom there, see that top button? That's 31%. So I reckon we're about 15 conversations about how beautiful our mountain is away from being like absolutely back to normal again in Cape Town. Joburg is lagging slightly behind, but it ain't going to be long, you know. There are other strange indicators coming through, and this all backs up this idea on a consumer level that maybe what happened was there was a slowdown and a reduction rather than sort of destruction. So there's a difference between the middle class disappearing and people holding onto their money, people defraying decisions, people maybe downsizing a little or changing levels of things. That's very different to we don't have a middle class anymore. The middle class has been wiped out. And one of the first indicators was vehicle sales. So February 21, total vehicle sales, 37,000. It's only 13% down from February 2020. Pretty amazing. We expected car sales to, if the middle class has been wiped out, that number wouldn't be 13, that would be closer to like 53. You know? So again, I did a very weird little thing. I thought, well, hang on a moment. What happens, has anybody won or lost, or where does this all sit? The first thing I discover, Suzuki, February 2021, the best ever month in the history of Suzuki South Africa, 2,142 units sold. So if the middle class is in crisis and if nobody's buying cars, no one told Suzuki. Not a bad result, right? That made me interested. I went and dug into new car sales for the last 3 years. So this is a really fascinating view, because the gray line, the red line is 2021, right? So that's where we're at the moment with new car sales in a slightly more liberated environment where consumers are able to make choices. And we might not be post-pandemic, but certainly from January, I think things started to feel like I got some choices again and I kind of know roughly where I'm headed. if we try to compare this year to last year, you can see there's a slight sort of mathematical or relativity problem, because in April 2020, our car sales weren't great, like 105 cars sold. That's what happened. So we fell off the cliff. So comparing this year to last year doesn't tell you a story of any sort. What's far more interesting is to overlay 2019 onto 2021. It's one of the more bizarre graphs I didn't imagine it would look like this. You know, car sales are strangely cyclic, and to see something that matches so perfectly, with the exception of about a 10% shift, right? So there's about a 10% reduction in the number of cars sold. It's a weird number, that, because we've so far in my new baby, I'm seeing the 10% reductions happen in a couple of places, like lots of premium markets seem to be about 10% suppressed. But don't worry about the 10% so much. It's like, well, I suppose the car industry has to worry. I'm much more interested in that pattern. I mean, that's not just ducks pointing in the same row. They're like swimming in the same direction down the same river 2 years apart. You know, what it tells me is that consumer behavior, there seem to be some immediate indicators well outside of something like BrandMapp data that we're not back to normal, but certainly our patterns of behavior may well be coming back to normal. Okay, so back to what we did this year and our research. The first thing is we employed a simple principle that, you know, by jumping into the pool in the middle of COVID, it was a pretty nasty place. Consumers were obviously under serious pressure. And there was so much strange research done that proved amazingly interesting things like, oh, people were staying at home more in 2020 than they ever had before, or that, you know, more black market cigarettes had been sold. It didn't really make much sense to us. We decided to stay out the pool. So what it's given us is a really interesting moment in time. We have a 2020 piece of research that was done before COVID, and we have a 2021 set of data that effectively is done after the most severe restrictions were in place. To make it more meaningful, what we did was we tried to keep the interrogation as similar as possible. So this is a list of all the questions we asked. The stuff that's in orange is the stuff that's changed, either things that we put in because we thought they needed to be added. Obviously, there are a lot of little metrics in here that have changed. So within things, we've changed brands and companies and things like that. But these are the main things we've put in. So SEMs we put in. Still a little dodgy on SEMs, not terribly sure how useful they're going to be. But that's not my job. Anyway, so we put SEMs in for those of you who are obsessed with LSM, SEM, and that world. The rest of it we try to keep similar all the way through, even down into our media usage. We've added in some interesting questions, but we try to keep the interrogation as stable as possible in order to be able to give us a reasonable longitudinal view. So we're looking for a before and after view of the world, right? So by doing that, we managed to get quite an interesting point in time. And we think it's certainly our first real view of just how bad 2020 was. So we obviously couldn't ask people a lot of these questions beforehand, but after COVID, we've asked the question, which unfortunate events happened to you last year? Probably the question, someone close to me died of COVID, the option was probably a little bit too wide. I think you know, all you need to do is have the managing director of your company die of COVID, and there are 3,000 people in the company, and everyone would tick the button. But far more interesting for us is a little bit further down. Look at, I lost most of my income, and I lost my job. So this talks back to those charts I was showing you earlier. You know, for 13% of the total group to say I lost most of my income, and for 6% only to say I lost my job, shows like a radical resilience in this segment of the market. They just weren't as hard hit. And I can tell you that of those 6%, I've already cross-referenced using my crosstab tool. I've already cross-referenced them with what they currently do. And about 60% of them have already got their jobs back. They're working again. So a massively resilient group of people. The people who lost most of their income, the vast majority are self-employed. So it begs this question, and can data answer that, oh, everything's changed forever, right? And I'm here to tell you that in terms of what our data is telling us, there are a lot of ways in which not very much has changed at all. So we've always asked this question, how are you feeling financially compared to 2 years ago? in these charts that follow. The gray is always 2020 and the orange is always 2021. It's fascinating that in this segment of society, and it's because I showed you that fast increasing graph of income, it's pretty obvious that people who are entering the market, who are becoming middle class and becoming top enders, life is going to get increasingly better for a lot of them. So we see, much better and a bit better off. It's over 40% of people, over 40% of people of our BrandMapp audience. So what it means is that even after 2020, there are still more people who feel better off than worse off financially in this market segment. If you looked at the whole of South Africa, I think we'd get a very, very different picture. But in this crucial group of 12 million consumers, it's not very different this year to last year. I looked at motor cars, fascinating that an online piece of research of 30,000 people should render such incredibly stable data on something that you'd expect it to, right? What brand of car do you drive? Well, we know that there weren't a lot of cars sold last year. Not a lot happened in the automotive industry. You'd kind of expect this to be there, and we see almost no change at all. If we look at something like primary banking, there wasn't a lot of reason to change your bank during 2020. Not that the banks did a lot to make us love them during 2020, but not a lot of reasons to change your bank. And we discover that, wow, 2021 results come in, banking is almost identical. The only shift, Capitec, a tiny bit up. And if you look down at the bottom, the other goes from 5 to 8%. I mean, these are nominal, tiny little shifts. Capitec claims that they had a growth year, 14% up. And those little minnows, the time banks and stuff in this market have picked up some scraps at the bottom. But I mean, really, there's nothing to show. Even if we look at something like medical insurance, so we were all super worried that a lot of people would be financially stressed and wouldn't be able to keep up their medical insurance. And this is not a time of life to not have medical insurance. What do we see? Well, very, very similar result, definitely a little down dip, so 4% down in medical aid schemes. And if you look at the total, about 7% of people this year said, 7% more people said, I don't have any medical products. Well, that tallies almost exactly with what the data is coming back from the medical guys about what happened in 2020. Discovery itself, so they've got about 57% of the market in this segment. They say that they only lost 2% of members. A hell of a lot of people did downgrade. So it's a downgrade, it's a degrading industry. I don't know whether that's it might be a bad pun, I'm not sure. It's fairly degrading to have to go through medical procedures, but a lot more people simply downgraded than left the medical schemes completely. Very, very similar result though, is the point. So those are the things where it's almost like nothing changed and we expect nothing to change. So, from a data validity point of view, like, phew, those are some of the first places I went to look. Sometimes, though, we would hope for similar results to tell a much better story. So this is a really super interesting one. Is there any hope for restaurants? Every year we ask the question, we ask it the same way. How often do you eat out at sit-down restaurants? And that's what the results looked like in 2020. So obviously for 2021, we couldn't ask how often have you? That would have been stupid. We had to change the question. So we said, how often do you see yourself eating out at restaurants? In other words, we're now trying to measure appetite versus reality from a year ago. And our restaurant clients were obviously hoping that this wouldn't be, that it was going to be a terrible result, but not too terrible. And that is what 2021 looks like. So possibly one of the most promising and wonderful charts that any restaurateur could look for. What it basically says is that the moment we're able to go back to restaurants, the moment we have money, that we don't feel threatened in any way, the vast majority of middle class and up South Africa want life to go back to just exactly what it was, almost exactly. Not a single bit of shift. Just a huge indicator that we desperately want life to go back to normal in some ways. So again, from a strategic point of view, this is, maybe the lesson here for the restaurant industry is there's no need to reinvent yourself. You need to find a way of treading water for a while until people are able to behave the way they want to again. And the way they want to behave is exactly where they were. Okay, that's all the stuff that's the same. So what about what I call toilet flush moments? Sounds like a terrible analogy, but so it's just one of those little terms we come up with in the last couple of years. It's a very Cape Townian thing. which I think quite a lot of you up in the northern provinces are going to be experiencing quite soon too. So when we had the drought in Cape Town, there was a time when people were literally like, I mean, I had my teeth brush water sink going into a bucket and pouring it on my plants. We were saving water everywhere. And now with the dams full and the drought over and no water tariffs, there are a few things that some of us still do. So for me, the only thing I still do is I don't flush my toilet every time. Okay, it's sort of Zimbabwean rules. That's I wasn't being rude to the drought in Zimbabwe. Everybody said did the same thing. So what are the toilet flush moments? What are the things that we think we can see have happened that we think might continue having a major impact going forward? The first thing to understand is that we were and remain a very traumatized country. So we've asked this question the same way every year. Don't narrow your eyes and get too close to the screen. I'll show you an expanded view of the top of it. What's interesting is just to look at that big picture and go, there are these two things we're massively worried about. Then there's a group of things that we're very worried about. And then there's kind of the rest of the bunch, right? So there's almost like this line between the things that really keep us awake at night and other things. Interestingly, 5G health risks, not even on the charts yet. Watch that one as the story unfolds in 2021. I mean, when Vladimir Putin bans technology until the results are in, you got to wonder, like, how good is this thing? Or, how dangerous is it? Anyway, I think 5G will probably rise up over the years. When you look at that top group, the one thing we inserted this year was global pandemics, COVID and global pandemics. And of course, it rises quite high to the top of the pile. But how radical is it that we live in a country where crime and corruption are still more likely to keep us awake than a global pandemic that we're in right now that's killed 4 million people and continues to kill people? Like, I've got close relatives who are desperately fighting in hospital right now. And I guess I'm the same. I'm probably more worried still about crime and corruption. It's a massive indictment on our country. What it says, though, is that as consumers, we need to understand that we're a traumatized country. We think differently to other places in the world. I think if you did this piece of research anywhere other than perhaps some of the third world developing countries, the Brazils and maybe Indonesia and those kind of countries, there are very few places in the world where COVID wouldn't be top of the pops for everyone. So what are some of the other places we've seen big shifts? Well, we have a lot of personal statements and psychographics in the BrandMapp data. We ask these questions every year. You tick the box if you think it applies to you. So it's important to keep in touch with friends. Last year, 50% of people ticked that box. I like being original and different, 52, healthy, fit lifestyle, 49. These are very useful metrics for those of you who work with data, because obviously it means that you can almost halve the population into people who think it's important to look good, people who don't, people who like being original, different, people who don't, etc. But as a full metric, it's just interesting to kind of tap the mindset of people. So we wondered how this was going to change. Well, it's amazing how these metrics, which are very much like they're quite introvert, they're quite self-aware sort of metrics, have all gone up considerably, again, by like a factor of 10% gross in most cases. Watching sport, not up very much. Obviously, for those 22% of people, a lot of them probably missed watching sport quite a lot. I actually thought it would be considerably higher, but nah, not really. Cooking for friends and family up quite a bit, but look at the top one. It's important to keep in touch with family and friends. I think lockdown made us really look in the mirror. This is a really interesting kind of look inside the mind, the psychometrics of the consumer. So we definitely have had some kind of compassionate shift that's happened during 2020. Lockdown was good for making us all a little bit more human. The other places we see massive change. So now what's important about this is, obviously, a lot more people would have tried ordering, eat in or Mr. Delivery type things during the year. What we're trying to do here is get some kind of relativity on it. That's the important thing about the before and after moment. So when we look at 2020, 49% of people said, I don't use any of these services. The reason the Checkers, Bottles, and Woolies aren't there is because they didn't really exist last time we were in field. So those are new services, which is lekker because it gives us a moment in time where we can go, well, what has the take-up been? Has it been 50%, 3%? Okay. So what happened in 2021? Well, the first thing is you see I don't use any of them plummeting from 49 to 28%, which means that a heck of a lot more people started using home delivery services. Look at the rise, the gross increase in Uber and Mr. D from 21 to 36, 22 to 36. This is a fairly significant increase. Checkers 60/60 from 0 to 11% of total middle class and up population is significant. It's like, wow, there was I know just from my own personal experience that we have a lot of children in the area that I live in. I sit and I watch the nappies being delivered and have for like quite a long time. But all of a sudden, the nappy deliveries were combined suddenly with a Checkers 60/60 sticker on the back of the motorbike. So this is definitely a place where things have changed. If you do the maths, it means that food delivery usage in total went up 27%. I cannot see this behavior not lingering for quite a long time. There's no way that once you get used to not standing in a queue or getting in your car and driving out for your KFC or whatever it is, I don't think I think this will have an effect. We certainly see it in the rest of the data. There's more proof in the pudding, if you'd excuse the pun, that people are probably not going to want to, or now that they've discovered that a guy can arrive with piping hot meal in the back of a car that you get delivered, and it's not a restaurant experience. It's your KFC or your Nando's or your McDonald's, or it's your takeaway meal. Rather get someone to deliver it to your house. I think that might be a behavior that takes quite a long time to tail off. So it's not a threat, it's an opportunity for the industry. Know that, understand it, and respond to it appropriately. Excuse me. I love this one. So we obviously, again, we normally ask people how often, which of the following flights have you taken in the last year? Here we ask, which flights do you expect to take? So this is, again, it's an appetite kind of measurement. And boy, did we miss flying, hey? This market flies a lot. I mean, look back at last year when only 40% of people didn't expect to fly. 40% had flown domestically, 17% had taken an international flight for holiday. So it's like a lot of flying going on. We now ask this year, what do you expect to do? And look how everything goes up, except for domestic flights for business, which I think look at what we're doing now and ask yourself, how soon is this behavior going to change radically? So I don't think we will ever fly up to Johannesburg for business pitches again. We will certainly fly up for a meeting. If we were all able to put all of you in a room today for 45 minutes, it would be lovely to have that human interaction. But you know what? By and large, for short meetings especially, why fly when you can Zoom, And I do think that is going to have an impact on, and especially financially, the savings involved, especially for small businesses in not having to fly around. I think that's a trend we're going to see continuing. One of the other big issues that we see in big measurements is this idea of the growth of fiber in the home. So we ask, how do you connect to the internet? Look how in total, this is at home, right? So it's not asking how do you connect to the internet in total. It's just saying when you're at home, how do you connect? So cell phone connections plummeted quite a lot. And it's done so in tandem with fiber going up. So that fiber growth is massive, right? I found out that Vumatel, which is one of the biggest providers in this country, so they said that their 2020 revenues had gone up 43%. Remember that the cell phone providers and fiber optics guys were essential services. So while we were sort of sitting at home and scratching around for the last remnants of whatever alcohol we had left, the guys who were laying fiber were out working, man, in the suburbs, working. And there is now a fairly widespread fiber network. So the growth in fiber is huge. And again, the insight here is not just, wow, everyone's got fiber. It's that fiber is a serious enabler. It enables your whole family to interact digitally in a completely different way. It allows you to do things differently, to act certainly as a privileged middle class and up consumer. It allows you access to a slightly different consumer behavior. And we see that consumer behavior coming through immediately in all sorts of ways. I don't think that fiber is necessarily connected to online shopping, but just this general increase in consumer behavior means that something like online shopping last year went from 82 to 92% of total pop. So it doesn't look like a massive change, but 10% gross is a fairly significant increase, considering that this was the group of people who were shopping online anyway before COVID. right? So this is it's not that these people weren't shopping online, 82% were already. What's super interesting though is the way that what we shopped online in 2020 changed. So the traditional leading categories, shoes and bags, clothes and fashion, those kind of things, we saw a bit of a dip in the percentage of people actually buying those things online. We already had them, and there was no need to buy them in the same volume. The stuff which I'd call general household or general requirements, we actually saw a significant shift. Again, understanding how data works, if I look at something like computers and software, it's gone from 9% of people saying I bought in that category online to 12%. Doesn't look big, but it's a 3% increase out of a category that was only 9%. That's a significant statistical shift. So these are actually quite big increases. We did a lot of shopping online, but the places where it went completely haywire was right here. So if you look at garden supplies, that's a 100% increase effectively. Groceries doubled 9% to 18%, and wine and alcoholic drinks also damn near doubled. So these are huge category shifts. The story that I've been telling people is the story, if you look at a Woolworths, their annual report, 158% growth in online grocery. I think what's important there is that as consumers, we got much better at shopping we got better at online shopping. So although I may not have felt that comfortable buying fresh vegetables online, I was certainly super comfortable to have somebody deliver my toothpaste. I mean, rather avoid the queues and get the provisioning, as I call it. So basic provisioning, I think we're getting better at understanding, hey, you might as well just let some oak on a motorbike come and drop off your provisions. You're not going to get a better tube of Colgate toothpaste just because you go to the store yourself. Whereas the fresh veg may be slightly different. So we've seen this huge increase. I think it's going to continue. I do think this is a trend that's set to stay. On the same line as talking about the getting better at shopping, one of the beautiful results we see is, so this is the question where we say, okay, where have you actually bought something from online? There's a lot of browsing that goes on. Browsing is about 3 times the volume of buying. But where have you actually bought something from? In 2020, almost 50% of respondents had used Takealot. Fast forward to 2021, that number's gone up to 65%. I mean, Takealot bashed it out the park in 2020. The rest of the players in the game, surprisingly, not massive increases. Woolworths, you can see 15 to 18, but it was definitely Takealot that was the massive winner in this area. They themselves reported a 65% surge in revenues, right? So we're just showing what we now know from the annual report is a truth. What's super interesting is that when you get better at being an online shopper and you realize that it's just a commodity-driven world, you realize what I've just said, that if you're looking for a printer and it costs X in one place and X plus 200 Rand in another, you're a complete idiot if you don't buy the cheapest one. It's the same printer, okay? And Takealot have made a business very much based on the Amazon model of making sure that on a commodity level, they tend to beat prices most of the time. I think that's what explains the win. Okay, I'm almost there. I've got 3 more slides to share with you. As Jen said, we are going to be covering media in a completely different section. We cover everything we can possibly do with media. It's fascinating. It's an area that has changed quite significantly during lockdown. And there's no way I could do justice to it as part of this. This was just to give you sort of a taste, a snapshot of some of the headline stuff. When we start digging into media, it's a completely different story. I'm going to give you 2 little tasty bits. The first one I just ran, we put television in, the frequency of television for the first time ever in our data. We've traditionally been quite a print-dominated survey over the years. As print has declined, we've picked up in radio and TV and digital media to try and track as much as we can. I just love this little metric because when we track generations against how much TV they're watching, it does look as if older people are likely to be watching a little bit more TV. I can age myself by saying, or date myself by saying, I really was there when we turned TV on for the first time in this country. I was quite small, just disclaimer. But I grew up with my father permanently saying to my sister, "You're going to get square eyes, young lady." And I think it's quite hilarious that given the changes in media, what appears to happen now is it sort of works the other way around. The children are looking at their parents going, you're going to get square eyes, Dad, if you don't move away from the TV. Okay, so lots of stuff to come in media. Here's a real tantalizer for you. If you thought, print media, I can tell you had an incredibly hard year. 2020 is a year that whatever was left of the magazine industry will very happily forget. And newspapers, have had their struggles, although it feels to us like the worst is over. But I'll tell you that this is the sales chart for one of the top 10 newspapers in this country. And what it means is that they managed somehow, in the middle of all the crisis that we were going through, to go from selling 18,000 of their newspapers in September 2020 to a circulation in February of 32,000. So there is some good news out there. There are people who are doing excellent things in the media world, and I'll leave it to you to guess who that is, and I'll unpack that for you in the media webinar that we do. The final thought I want to leave you with is that this world of data is just so lovely, and I'm so chuffed that a lot of the new things that we put in this year have turned out to be kind of interesting or fun. When I say fun, I mean that they allow you to paint even richer pictures of your consumer than you were able to with our last data set. So we do two things. I'm just giving you a silly example of how you can use a cross-tab tool, like a Telmar type tool, to have some fun and find out crazy things. We asked for the first time ever this year about musical tastes. We thought it would just add a real kind of layer of flavor to being able to create personas and be able to understand people. Music's such an integral part of our lives, or a lot of people's lives. So we asked musical taste, and then in a completely different place, we ask how likely you are to buy cannabis-infused products. And interestingly, about 11% of the total population ticked that chart. So what I did was I cross-referenced them. I cross-referenced the type of music you listen to the chances of you buying or using cannabis-infused products in the near future. And I discovered something which is, to those of us, I was in the music industry for a good portion of my life. This makes total sense to me. Basically, if you listen to gospel, classical, African country, or a bit of R&B, you're at average or less likely to want to think about cannabis-infused products. However, if you listen to boom, boom, electronic or rap music or metal music or reggae man, or even a bit of folk music, the chances are that you are much more likely to buy cannabis-infused products. So for all the parents out there, just the way I would think about it, there's a clear line here. I call it the dope safety zone. So you could use this piece of data to encourage your children to listen to one of those musical genres, not the ones above, in order to make sure that they don't turn into the wrong kind of adults. Okay, that is the end of all I have for you in this session. Hope you found some of that interesting, and that I wasn't going too fast. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon. Entertaining as always, and hugely informative. I think we've all been hungry for more data. There's been a dearth of data. Thank you for letting Telmar showcase this before it hits anywhere. I know this is your baby and you love this research. So do we. It's wonderful. So thank you. Brandon was talking about the media workshop. So just to let you know, that will be on the 26th of August. And there's another one before that on how are top-end South Africans feeling. So this is a series of 3 workshops. So please make sure you tune in. And when we send you more invites, please pass them on to whatever friends you think and colleagues would be interested. I've answered all the questions, mainly on the Q&A line, but there's one from Deborah Skeppers, Brandon. She says, I get the feeling that people are thinking very short-term when they talk about their financial position. Rising CPI should be worrying them, along with our debt, as you mentioned. Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, that's the big caveat. So we see about 40% of South Africans traditionally are debt stressed. In other words, they in our research, they will admit to being debt stressed. TransUnion reckon that right now, the tragic default, so 3 months or more in things like retail accounts and personal loans, sit around about the 30 to 35% mark. So as this year goes on, I think that I think that we're going to definitely see an increasing effect. The point, I guess, that I'm trying to make is this is all a question of relativity. If you're in that sort of very, very high pressurized zone of households under 10K, the chances are, if you lose 500 Rand income, it's a heck of a lot. In the majority of the market that we're talking about, this middle class and up, the reason that people there are resilient is that, as you can see, even though they maybe are not going to be able to eat steak 3 times a week, they can still afford to keep up their medical aid. So it's just trying to. I don't think people are living in a bubble. I think we're all highly aware of how bad things are. But what we're able to do is those of us who are privileged enough to live in the middle class and up are able to handle the stress a little bit better. So we're able to downgrade things in the right places to make sure that we protect our lives in the most important places. Whereas the traumatized group can't really do that. Is that a good answer to that question? I mean, I get it. I don't think people are fantasizing. They're not living. This isn't magical thinking. I think that relatively speaking, the middle class and up are able to be a little bit more optimistic.
Thank you, Brandon. That was great. We're going to hand over to Elka, our product marketing manager, to just showcase a few of the benefits and features of our software. Brandon was alluding to his crosstab tool, which is Survey Time, where he found all of these insights and nuggets. So over to you, Elk.
Okay, I'm going to recap or speak specifically about 2 of our solutions that are very popular and often used, and that is our statistical and insight solutions. Let's just see why. So with Telmar, Telmar's a very data-driven solutions company. Not only do we provide solutions for insights and statistics, but we also provide solutions for media planning and data integration. So with Telmar, you get more data because of the flexibility of being able to load proprietary data, syndicated or industry data. You get inspired results because we have automated visualization capabilities and better results through built-in processes and procedures. All of our solutions are available in the cloud 24/7 from anywhere and on any device. And our insight solutions have been specifically developed to provide impactful insights that lead to smarter decisions, and the statistics solutions really to simplify complex statistical analysis so that you can get better and actionable results. Looking specifically at our insight solutions, we have an intuitive drag and drop functionality which allows complete customization. I have a very short video which I will play you to show you how that works. So I can add my demographic target markets to the rows, and I can drag and drop additional demographic filters onto the rows. Just a simple drag and drop. You can also add more demographic filters by clicking onto the row, as you can see in this example. And finally, once you've created your target groups, you can also change the name. In this example, I am changing it to my target market, but you may want to change it to your brand name or whichever analysis you're working on. Should you forget that what the original title was, you can also recover that at a later stage. We have very easy ways to uncover important insights, because we know that dealing with surveys is often very complicated because there are a lot of questions in the survey. So we have developed ways that you can quickly find those questions that will help build your strategy and analysis and find those stories, just as you've seen Brandon's told a very beautiful story about his research. So we've enabled people to do that very quickly with our tools. For example, we have 2 different reports that you can export. One is called separated report. We have the ability to highlight the information that is important to you. For example, here I have selected index, and I want the highlight applied to the index that is greater than 105. Additionally, I also don't want to export all of the data. I only want to export the top 10 data items that will be of a particular interest for my analysis. And then that is applied to all the rows in the crosstab. You can export either to Excel or to Google Sheets. And the separated report will put all of the data onto separate Excel spreadsheets once it's exported, and continues to keep the highlighting rules you've applied. The second type of report is called a combined report. And as the name suggests, this will export all the data on one Excel spreadsheet. You can also add color tiles, which will quickly show you high and low numbers, low in red, blue, and high in red. And once again, you can say, I only want to see the top 10 most important data items for this analysis. And once you've exported it, it also keeps all the colors that you've applied. So I'm going to try and move a bit faster because I know I'm aware that we have a time frame issue. This is really great for when a client asks for just a quick snapshot, or, you know, I've read something, can you show me what that looks like? So we have a quick, simple, single export. So what does that mean? Let's say I want to be able to very quickly show my client how different car brands are in terms of sport interests. I can export just that chart or graph into Excel. And this is one of my favorite. I have the visual as well as the data. And because all our exports are live, you can change it once it's been exported, either in Excel or PowerPoint. And the same with PowerPoint. Once it's exported, you can adjust and manipulate as it suits your needs. We have a visual data representation, which is put on a two-dimensional map, really a positioning map. And in this example, I have two car brands in the columns and some attitudinal statements in the rows. And it's very as easy as clicking on a button to map the similarities and the differences between those two brands. You have different, you are able to map that differently, and there's options there. You can ask it to show you the best fit of the brands. You can ask our solutions to show you the weighted symbols. You can hide lines, add grid lines. And the one last thing I just want to show you here is that you can also upload images into this solution. I'm just going to, for the interest of time, move on. And my all-time favorite, having worked in an agency and knowing that there's so much data that we have to sift through, and as I've said, find those stories and those golden nuggets. Once you've done all this data mining, you then have to spend hours creating a PowerPoint presentation. Well, not with our solutions. With our Insight solutions, you can set up an entire export of your data straight into your company template. Let me show you how that looks. So in this example, I have a number of brands in the columns. I have some demographics in the rows, some life stage questions, and attitudinal questions. With the click of one button, it creates a set of graphs. Any graph, we have over 20 that you can choose from. I have uploaded, I just want to pause for a second. I have uploaded a Telmar template into this platform so that when I export it, you can see that it exports straight into our company template. For those of you that know me, I love doing graphs that have got two data items, percentage column and index, because it gives you a real clear picture of reach potential versus affinity. And with our solutions, you are also able to create one of those types of graphs. And as I said, it's completely live export, which means that you can adjust it in any way with any type of color and font size that is relevant to you. So I'm not going to go, just because we have a time frame issue. There's a summary of all the benefits of our insight solutions. In terms of our statistics solutions, really advanced calculations to help you find groups of consumers that are high value, and these are based on attitudes and profiles. So this is an example of our cluster platform. You can see in the rows I have a number of attitudinal statements. In the table I have a mobile brand. I click on the cluster analysis, and all the statistic number crunching is happening in the background, and you can see from this example that the ideal recommended number of clusters is 4. And then we have something called determination and CH index, which are really about cluster evaluation metrics. Once you've done that, you can also, it's got the flexibility to go back into the data and see which data items or which questions from the survey are actually not very influential in this cluster development. I can absolutely remove them. And I can rerun the cluster. And you can see now the recommended cluster is 3. You can scroll between different types of, or to different number of cluster groups. We have different data visualizations, such as the table view, which is what you're looking at now. You can also have a look at the chart view. Remember, this is very busy because it's on the 6 clusters. We have built-in statistical explanations for standard deviation, unified index. As you hover over that, you will see the explanation of what those mean, and you can also just set a highlight option, and everything is completely seamlessly integrated with our insight solutions, which means you can export all these clusters back into survey time. We have developed multiple approaches to audience segmentation, because typically the kind of questions that would be included in a cluster analysis are Likert scale questions. What does that mean? Agree, definitely agree, tend to agree, etc. With our statistical solutions, you can also use volumetric coding. What does that mean? It deals with questions about how much time have you spent, how much money have you spent on different items, the number of visits, or the amounts of product consumed. You can also add binary questions, which are the simple yes and no, or agree or disagree. Or if you would like, you can use any one of those together in one cluster analysis. And finally, we have a really advanced competitive brand mapping. This is a correspondence correspondence analysis example. I have a number of alcohol categories in the columns with some attitudinal statements in the rows, and very quickly you can create a correspondence analysis to see the similarities and differences between the brands and the statements. And there's a number of functions built into our correspondence analysis, where you can look at the statistics, remove items that aren't really relevant or not having a significant influence over the analysis. And we are also able to do a multi-sort with an easy export into Excel. So I just want to say, Brandon, thank you so much. You are truly an amazing storyteller, and I've loved listening to you, and I've seen some of the feedback, and everyone's been really, really interested and engaged with you. So thank you very much for partnering with us. And for everybody out there, we help your business with data neutrality, scalability, intuitive insights, and statistical solutions. So that is the end of this webinar. I don't know if there are more questions, if we have time.
Thank you, Elk. I've been answering all your questions on the Q&A line, everyone. And one of the questions was, when will this data be available? We've got to get our hands on it and use it. So we'll be releasing to the industry on the 5th of July. And and we will keep you posted. We will send you the webinar after this as follow-up, and our sales team will be in touch just to ensure you have everything you need. And thank you again, Brandon and Wi-Fi Stuart. We really appreciate you showing your data before it has even hit any computers in this industry. And that is what we're going to continue to do with our data webinars, is to showcase our partners' data. So Brandon, yes, an amazing storyteller. Thank you.